me to explain a way a person might essentially picture what the experience of schizophrenia might feel like. Imagine now you have the ability during your awakened world, your awakened life, the life you live once you are not sleeping. You are externally projecting said world. Whereas within the sleep, the dream, you internally project said external world. Ultimately, the question arises at, what is the true reality? Or is everything simply just the same manifestation? The bridge of said transfer, however, one might argue is beyond the external physical boundaries at which you see beyond the point of your iris, your pupil. At the pupil, you find where you essentially arise. In the pupil is the separation of those two kingdoms, the kingdom of the body and the kingdom of the mind, known as the dream world. Now, in my explanation, if you wish, in the physical awakened world, which is the same as a dream-like projection, the rate at which a consciousness essentially is either outside of the self or within the self, experiencing in its opposing experience. As an example, in the analogy, a schizophrenic individual may feel that the external world is internally communicating to them during the awakened state, whereas within the dream world, the external universe is communicating internally, and you internally communicate externally, once again within said dream world. Because essentially, if you may get the point of the analysis at this particular time, when you are dreaming, you are not vocally speaking, you are internally vocally speaking, which within a dream world is the internal vocal world. And ultimately, the shift at which said world of vocal resonance, internal or external, dictates what the rate of the exchange of said consciousness is in the experience, which means in the awakened world, you feel the consciousness is externally affecting you internally, whereas within a dream state, you are internally affecting the external world, arising a concept of, say, protagonist and antagonist perspectives, different mentalities, separate kingdoms. And ultimately, the central point at which the connection is made is the pupil, the student. In the student, you might find that even within each of those particular experiences, you may create the switch, and results in individuals themselves in the external world experiencing an individual inferring into their minds. Echolocation, which upon said echolocation, you might essentially, in the explanation, arise to, you feel that you are telepathically communicating, projecting an inward telepathy. Now, in this particular explanation, you might start to see why the experience of schizophrenia might sound a little bit wild to deal with. You literally find the key of what the essential meaning is. The dream world. Whether you are dreaming it or physically living it, said world is of the same nature within a separate kingdom. And at the pupil is where the kingdoms separate. At the pupil is where your internal mind begins, which within even said internal mind, if you may close your eyes now, simply picture me speaking to you as I may be during the video. You might begin to essentially kind of picture what I might be doing based on your imagination. But said imagination might now be a connective thought, a hive mind, which from one particular singularity, all other singularities themselves may connect to. It is a gravitational point in the universe. And in that arises then the hyper-complex of a grandiose experience, if you wish. Because ultimately, each individual can arise to said experience according to the iron content within their particular cellular level, resulting in from said metal arising a mental condition. And from said mental condition, you conduct consciousness at a different rate. Rather than being an affected, you become the affector. Rather than being the hammer or the nail, and essentially you get to, once again, the moment you lose your cool as a result of this experience, as a result of said instability, if you don't learn to simply realize everybody's allowed to think, everybody's allowed to speak. Because the moment we take those rights away, we essentially see what causes social disease. Social disease is, in essence, once again, a mental condition, which from these particular social diseases of social poor interactions according to the development of said brains of each individual particular self. The more we push for the legalizing of, say, all different types of harder drugs and harder drugs and harder drugs and harder drugs, we might find that the reason drugs are illegal is to specifically prevent this experience. And ultimately, the cost or the sentence you will experience for breaking this law is not going to jail externally, it's going to jail internally, which may feel eons of time. Because the more you develop from this condition, you would essentially find that you have such a depth in your mind from the ability to specifically infer every little particular thing. You intel and introspectively analyze everything, overthinking. A hyper-creative mind creates the mind around itself, which arises to the question of, once again, the notion of a singularity, which all things stem from. And the moment you awaken to said mind, you become an effector, a driving force in the universe, which then from the effector, you have the affected. And in this particular statement, one might experience why a person with schizophrenia would then might arise to, say, a Christ complex, a Messiah complex. Because ultimately that is the pathway of the mind into this Christ-like being, a gentle self that is so empathetic to everything because it understands everything. And in understanding everything, it is extremely intelligent. Now, you might think I'm speaking about myself from a third personification at that particular point, or simply from a deeper, once again, state within even beyond the state of the pupil of my eye. I have a depth at which I can pull further deep within my skull, resulting in once a third personification, From the external, you have I, me, and then you enter into the, what would you call that? The collective mind. You can name it anything you want, but the collective mind is the kingdom of God. And in this mental universe, you create the same realm, whether you're sleeping or dreaming. And so, ultimately, the moral compass of the story is, I'm an example. You may either be tempted to rise to that occasion, or I may tell you, don't get messed up like I did. Thank you.